When I grew up in the 60s and 70s, I was listening to, if you recall, these gentlemen, Bob and Ray. I was listening to Gene Shepard. He is known now as the writer and narrator of Christmas Story, the movie. He was a raconteur, and he was a master storyteller, and I just fell in love with radio. I also enjoyed Radio Mystery Theater. E.G. Marshall hosted some radio plays, or a radio play every night for an hour. So I was enthralled with the radio, and then, it was a typical story. It was supposed to be my dream, or was my dream, and something I loved to do or wanted to do, and everyone around me said, radio, it's so hard to do. How are you going to do that? There's no school for that, per se. There's no career path that's very defined. And in my circle, it was, well, why don't you do something that's standard, so to speak? So I went to law school. I became an attorney. 30 years later, I said to myself, you know what? This is not what I was in the sandbox thinking that I want to do, although I do it well and I enjoy being an attorney. I don't enjoy it as much as my original dream. And you know what? What's the point? Let's dig in here and let's see what I can do with radio. I just kind of woke up one day and said, let's get to this. And I said to myself, it might be difficult, might be hard, but let's try to do something different. Let's try to do something that I think would be fun for me. And if it's fun for me, I would hope that others would listen because it's fun for them. And that's what we did.
For those who have not heard it before, tell us what they can expect to hear when they listen to Everything Old is New Again.
Well, it's basically what we're going to say is it's America's entertainment pop culture talk show. Each week we take a nostalgic look to the future. If that makes any sense, what we do is we examine a particular topic of pop culture that's popular today. We look to its history. We use some audio clips to jog our memories. And we try to understand why that's popular to this day. And further along the way, we do quizzes, we have characters, we just two guys basically sitting at a bar arguing, which is the favorite or the best Disney princess, something like that. And we just have some fun with it. It's a natural conversation between a friend of mine from high school all those years ago, back in the late 70s, and myself, and it's just free form where we just really have some fun to try to bring some fun to the radio.
What kind of feedback do you get from audiences? It seems to me that people find life to be very complicated, to be very difficult, and I suppose every generation has said this, but we in particular now with all of our smartphones and devices, this allows us to use current technology, but think back to a time when maybe things were a little simpler, or it's the memories of our childhood that we always like to have as we go on through middle age and older.
Yes, and I get feedback a lot based on the idea that I guess the biggest word that it describes our show is enthusiasm, because we enjoy the topic. And I think it's so local of a topic, if you will, because we reach into topics like which is the best James Bond, or is Night of the Living Dead versus The Walking Dead, or Star Trek in the 60s, is that cast better than the Star Trek now? Things like that. What's the best sitcom of all time? And what happens is we find that people that are listening, whether it be a younger person or an older person, are turned on by it in some way because they want to get involved and have this we call it this argument that you love to have. So an older person, let's say, will try to bring their son in, or the son will try to bring dad in and say, listen, these guys are talking about, The Walking Dead. I love The Walking Dead, but what is this Night of the Living Dead stuff, Dad? Did you ever hear of this? And Dad, in turn, will say, yeah, sure, Night of the Living Dead was a 60s movie that I absolutely loved, scared the heck out of me when I was a kid. Let me tell you about that. Let's watch that together after we watch The Walking Dead. Whatever it might be, and have an interesting conversation about culture and bring the generations together, if that makes any sense. I know it sounds pie in the sky, but we find that is what's happening with the show.
And it's not pie in the sky because we do it with sports. The Boston Celtics of the 60s or the Chicago Bulls of the 80s. What was the best team of all time? And depending on what era you lived through, you may have a different answer. We're talking with Douglas Viviani. He's one of the hosts of Everything Old is New Again. Tell me, what is the biggest argument on air that you and your co-host David Cohen have ever had on a topic? What's the one where if somebody brings up this topic, you roll your eyes and say, oh, no, not this again?
This is going to be obscure because it reverts back to an audio clip from a comedian back in the 70s maybe you'll remember this. It was a fellow that would say, you don't have to call me Johnson. You could call me Ray.
Oh, sure.
You could call me. Okay.
He was on the Dean Martin Celebrity Roast, the Dean Martin Show.
Absolutely.
Big cigar, big mustache, right?
Yes, and he did later on in his career. He did these light beer commercials for Miller, and that was just a phenomenon for 2 or 3 years in the 70s. Every talk show, the Red Fox show, every variety show, wherever he was, wherever you would turn the TV on, the Gong Show eventually, he was there doing this one skit, this one routine. And for me, I found that fascinating that you can make a career out of that one joke, really, and you'll hear it throughout our show every so often. I'll refer to it, or I'll play it, and Dave will definitely roll his eyes and he can't come to grips with even laughing at it for a moment. They even did a spot on Family Guy with this gentleman, Jay Johnson, and it's just a quirky little thing that gets us going. But we argue about almost everything in a fun way. We say arguments you love to have. They're not. We don't get too heated. We just it's an argument with a smile, as if you're at the bar having a drink with a buddy. Best
sitcom of all time, in your view, is what?
Well, since we've done the show, I can reveal to me my pick is The Honeymooners, without doubt. And I choose that is not just the 1953 version where there was, I believe, 39 episodes total, which is what you see. Mm-hmm. But that was a skit, sort of a Saturday Night Live type of skit on the Jackie Gleason show, and went throughout his career even to the late 70s, where they did reunion shows. So I just thought the chemistry was terrific. I thought they were original. I thought it was something that you could relate. Anyone could relate to any of those shows. There was a bit of love involved as well, in the end, where, there was, sort of an argument you love to have, but at the end he got along with his wife and said she was the greatest and so forth. Others have said The Big Bang Theory recently. Others have said Seinfeld, certainly. So I think those, to me, are the top three. How about you?
I love The Honeymooners, and I was going to mention, if you didn't, all of those episodes as vignettes within the Gleason show that led right into the 90s, as you mentioned, with those reunions. We love The Big Bang Theory at home, although it's now 10 years and you're wondering just how much further we can go. Seinfeld I liked at the time, but I don't feel that the programs hold up as well as I thought they might have. And is that because they were so topical that now I'm looking 25 years later and I'm not just making fun of the big hair and shoulder pads and the sweaters, that maybe the humor is a little lost?
I agree 100%. I was very surprised at myself. It's on 11 o'clock every night here locally, and I haven't seen it in probably, I'd say at least 5 to 7 years. Maybe it will be rekindled at some point, but it's not. Yeah, it's funny. It's not a physical comedy, maybe like The Honeymooners has. You can still look at Jerry Gleason's reaction to what's going on, and Jackie Gleason's reaction, and still get a kick out of it. Maybe, I don't know. It's an interesting sociological question. Why I think most people agree they'll watch the Seinfelds, but after a couple times, that's it.
And God knows, after all this time, it's been on 100 times or so and made more money than about anything. Are we finding it more difficult because of the fragmentation of media? And I'm just talking about television and radio, never mind all the online and social. Is it harder for something to really catch fire because we don't have the same commonality of experience we did when the Gleason show was on, or even Seinfeld for that matter?
That's an interesting question. I would say yes and no. I think what's happened, there's been so much exploration of, let's just say, take the family sitcom, for example. There's been so much exploration of those topics since even Leave It to Beaver from the 50s and in Andy Griffith up till the present time, that if you look at that particular genre for one example, really there's Modern Family and Goldberg's, to me, that's on TV right now, and that's probably about it. That's consistently good and original and new, because so many of the issues, while topical and run across all of our lives, kids growing up and the problems and so forth, it's been done so many times, it's hard to find a new twist on an old theme. I think that probably has something to do with it.
Well, obviously, we could talk for an hour on this topic, but we'll let you and David do that. It's Everything Old is New Again. Douglas, it was a great pleasure to speak with you, and much success with the show in 2017.
Thank you, Jeff. Much appreciate the time and effort, and Happy New Year to everyone.